This video is my race recap of the 2025 Osaka Marathon. And look, overall, this race went very well. Like in hindsight, I've got no complaints, but there's a tricky thing with evaluating a race in hindsight, and that is like I always put like a silver glow around it. Now, it turns out that the day did not go ideal, but if you already saw my race log, then you already know that. But in this video, we're gonna dig into a few of the details. We're gonna talk about what happened and why I think it happened. So yeah, this might be fun for those of you that like to analyze races and whatnot. Let's get into it. Thanks for sticking through that intro. So on February 24th, 2025, I was flown to Japan with Mizuno and I ran the Osaka Marathon. This is my race bib right here. I actually taped it up right behind so you could look at it the whole time. And this is the medal. See this? Yeah, there we go. It's focusing on it. It's a very cool medal with the Osaka castle and a rainbow behind it. I love it. I think they did well with the medal design. Now, the Osaka Marathon is a fairly big marathon. In fact, I saw that it had 34,000 people. So definitely a big city marathon. Now, in this video, I'm really not going to be able to evaluate what it was like to run the Osaka Marathon as a normal runner. Now, because I ran the race with Mizuno, they really took care of us. And by taking care of us, I mean we had a VIP area, so we had somewhere to hang out before and after the race. And that's a good thing, because it was really cold that day. And again, if you've already seen the video, you know that it actually snowed during the race. Oh, and by the way, if you haven't seen my actual race vlog, I recommend you pause it here and then go back, watch the race vlog, and then come back so you know what we're talking about. In fact, if you've already seen the race vlog, I recommend you go back and watch it again. If for nothing more than it just gives me like a super high watch time. So thanks for that. Okay, so what do we have? We've got Osaka Marathon, fairly big race. Mizuno took care of us. You know, because you just went back and watched my video that I was filming the race. To film that race, this is what I was holding. I have an Insta360 selfie stick. I have a ball head tripod mount. And for the camera, I was using the Insta360 Ace Pro 2. It worked out very well. This is actually the first race that I've used the Ace Pro 2 for. This setup worked really well. I think the audio came through really well. And just overall, great action camera. I will probably be using that setup for my next couple races. Now, as far as my watches go, I was wearing two watches for the Osaka Marathon. On my left wrist, I had this. This is the Chorus Apex 2 Pro. I had this watch set to kilometers. And then on my right wrist, I had the Garmin Forerunner 965. I had this watch set to miles. And kilometers or miles, that really wasn't what I was paying attention to when I was looking at the watch. I was basically tracking my average pace, and I definitely wanted a backup in case I lost any of the data. Look, I realize that's a little over the top. I know not everybody runs with two watches, and I would love to tell you that it was just for race day, but I run with two watches all the time, so it was really no big deal. Oh, and before we get started, my race plan included using Morton 100 gels. I think I had 7 with me when I started the race. Now, I don't think the Morton gels played any part in my race other than fueling me appropriately, but again, if you've watched the video, you know that I did have some GI issues, so I wonder if you think that the Morton had anything to do with it. Drop a comment and let me know. Okay, so let's back it up to before the race. Now, the night before the race, okay, let's first back it up even further. So I went to Japan. Japan is a long way from where I live. In fact, Japan is 14 hours ahead of my home time zone. So I was very topsy-turvy, I had a very difficult time sleeping, but even so, the night before the race, my sleep wasn't that bad. In fact, I was so exhausted that I went to sleep about 8 o'clock. Now, I did go ahead and wake up at midnight, but then I went back to sleep until 2 o'clock. And then even though I was awake, I stayed in bed until 4 o'clock. Now, I'm only telling you this because I don't think fatigue played too big a role. At least I'm not blaming that at all. Now, I think when it comes down to it, I probably was tired. I probably didn't have like all the sleep that I could possibly get. But still, 6 hours of sleep and being in bed for 8 hours the night before a race is actually fantastic. And I was really happy to wake up at 4 a.m. and just realize that I'd had such a good night. Now, when I woke up at 4 a.m., I was in my room in the hotel and I had some food in my room. And I knew that the race wasn't starting for 4 hours and 15 minutes after I woke up. And this is where I'm going to start like making my excuses a little bit. I mean, in this case, I think my excuses are fairly valid, but I should probably tell you what my excuses are before I start making excuses for making excuses. Anyway, I woke up early and I decided to have something to eat in my room. Now, I had plenty of food with me. I had oatmeal, I had protein bars. So before I went downstairs for breakfast, which I knew was opening early, like the hotel was opening their breakfast bar 5:30 in the morning for us, but that was still an hour and a half away from when I woke up. So I woke up at 4 a.m. and of course I'm a little hungry because, you know, not only that I'd been asleep all night, but it was really like between lunch and dinner time in my home time zone. Now, also, because I had already been there for a couple of days, I wasn't really dialed in with a routine. And I'm talking about an eating routine, like getting enough calories, and also a bathroom routine. Now, as far as the eating routine goes, I think this was something that was in my head, and I was probably more worried about it than I needed to be. But because I was tapering, and I had been tapering for several days before this, like I didn't need to be eating the way I would when I'm training training at like 60 or 70 miles a week in like the peak of marathon training. But still, because I'd been traveling for a couple of days and I wasn't eating my normal food, I was thinking that I just wasn't getting enough calories, I wasn't getting good food to eat. So I had a little bit of anxiety that perhaps I needed more energy. And that's the reason when I woke up, not only was I hungry, but I wasn't really shy about eating. I had 2 bowls of oatmeal and a protein bar before heading downstairs to have breakfast with everyone else in the hotel. Now, when I got downstairs to the hotel, this was my second race day breakfast, and I was in there right at 5:30. So at this point at my second breakfast, it was still 2 hours and 45 minutes until the gun was going to start. Got that? Now, for my second breakfast, I had a bowl of rice with some scrambled eggs on it. I had another plate of scrambled eggs, and then I had a bowl of yogurt with some dried fruit or whatever they had. I mean, it was really delicious. Now, I just want to touch very briefly on what I said before about not being on my schedule. So not being on my eating schedule and not being on my normal bathroom schedule. Now, even though the toilets in Japan are the best you've ever seen, and let's just take a sidebar to talk about the toilets in Japan, because they are fantastic. And they're not just fantastic in like nice hotel rooms where I was staying. They are brilliant toilets wherever you go. And I'm talking about public places. And these toilets have heated toilet seats and bidets, and you know, the Japanese just really make going to the loo a treat. Anyway, with that said, I had been in Japan a couple of days by now, and I was unable to really go to the bathroom on a regular basis. And look, I'm sorry, if you are not a runner and you're watching this video, then you probably like have your jaw dropped wondering what I'm talking about. Well, not wondering what I'm talking about, I think it's obvious what I'm talking about, but you're wondering why I'm talking about it. Well, for runners, especially before a race, this is absolutely normal. So brief summary up until this point: arrived in Japan, didn't really eat well, didn't go to the loo much. Race day comes, have 2 breakfasts, and guess what? I didn't go to the loo before the race. Now, normally, I think some of you would probably be panicking, and it did cross my mind that it probably wasn't a good thing, but honestly, I wasn't worried at all. And I wasn't worried because I wasn't going on a regular basis. Now, that nonchalance turned out to be a mistake, although I really don't know what I could have done differently at that point of my day. So now we're on to the actual race. I know, you've been watching this race recap video for a few minutes now, and I am finally getting to the actual race. Oh, by the way, my finish time at the Osaka Marathon was 3 hours, 17 minutes and 25 seconds. And while I'm not totally unhappy with that, I mean, I know as a number, that's a fairly good finish time, right? And I know a lot of you look at that number and you think, wow, that's a really good finish time. I wish I could run a marathon in 3 hours and 17 minutes. Okay, but this is the beauty of running, and that we are all different. Like, you can't compare yourself to me and I can't compare myself to you. 3:17:25 was just a little slow as to what I was expecting to do that day. Because if I'm honest, I was feeling really good and the weather was really cold. So this is the time of the video where I want to put my Strava screen up on your screen and we'll go through some of this data together. So yeah, here we are, Osaka Marathon. I did add to the caption, so many issues and yet so much fun. And I definitely stand by that fun part. But just in a nutshell, my watch measured 26.5 miles and I uploaded the data to Strava from my Garmin 965. So just a little long, but 26.5 miles for a marathon is actually pretty spot on. I think if some of you are looking at that thinking, well, man, it's 0.3 miles over what you should have run. No, a marathon is a long way, and I wasn't cutting the tangents exactly all the time just because of so many people. So I was really happy to see 26.5. Anyway, total time 3:17:30, official time 3:17:25, average pace 7:27 a mile. It does say we have a temperature of 35 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about 1.5 degrees Celsius, with a humidity of 68%. Now, I did look at the weather before I started the race and I saw that the humidity was listed at 45%, but that's really neither here nor there. It's a lot drier than where I came from for this race. Let's just scroll down just a little bit to look at the race course. And you can see we've got like several out and backs, 1, 2, 3, and these were great places to see the front runners of the race and of course everyone that was behind me. I always think that's fun, just like running out and turning around and coming back and waving to everyone. And we'll dig into my splits in just a second, but I want to scroll down just a little more and we can see it's a very flat course, isn't it? Now we've got this little hill right here and we'll talk about that in just a second. And then there are like little blips here. These are just little bridges, and some of them were more difficult than others, but they were just very, gentle rolling hills. I was complaining about them at the time, but it was a flat course, more or less. Now, I do want you to just look down here. It says my heart rate. This is my average heart rate of 146. In fact, let's activate that now so we can see that across the course. Yeah, 146 is pretty low for me. I mean, it's actually quite low for a race day effort. But we'll talk more about that in just a second. Let's go up to splits. In fact, let me see this race analysis right here. This is the screen that I'm looking for, because now we're going to talk about 5K splits. And of course, we're going to talk about the pattern of this graph. So first of all, 5K splits. The first 5K started out at 22:01. Second 5K, I sped up a little bit to 21:29, slowed down a bit again to 21:56. Between 15 and 20K took me 22:19. Now look, up until this point, I'm feeling quite good. Well, physically, as far as muscles and aerobic system goes, I'm feeling quite good. Now, you remember in the race, it was about this time. No, it was much earlier than this. I think I started getting queasy around the 9-mile mark. I just cannot make my stomach feel good. It's really uncomfortable. Oh, the struggle is real. And by queasy, I mean like I could feel my stomach doing something, like it wasn't right. But early on, it wasn't really at a point where it was slowing me down. It was just something that I was aware of. And maybe, again, in hindsight, maybe it was something that I knew I was going to have to stop for eventually. But what I mean was, it wasn't holding my pacing back at all. That is, until it was. And you can see very clearly that mile 15 right here, this is when I had to stop and go to the loo. Now, I should say that I ran off the course to go to the loo, and I walked right into the bathroom. There was no one there, no lines, no one was waiting. I mean, that was actually very lucky for me from a timing perspective. I got in, got out as quick as I could. Well, that's actually not true either. I wasn't feeling very good at this point, so I did kind of drag my feet a little bit. But either way, I think I was in and out in 3 minutes or so, and then it was back on the course. Now, at this point, it was snowing. I've got to say that when it started snowing, and I first mentioned it on the video, I was really excited about this. And it was barely snowing at that point. Like when I first mentioned it, I think there were just a couple of snowflakes coming down. It was just really fun to see. Now, later in the race, it really started snowing. I mean, not blizzard, it wasn't settling on the ground, but it was snowing hard enough that I could catch the snow in my mouth. The snow was landed on my sunglasses and then it was melting. It was landing on the camera lens. I had to keep wiping it off. It was just a lot of fun. Now look, a lot of you, I think in the comments were complaining about the snow, or at least complaining for me, how you don't like running in the snow, it's too cold, but I was dressed very appropriately for this run. Okay, back to the race course. I came out of the porta potties and I started running again. And for a few minutes, I felt like a new man. It was cold, it was snowing, I had just let my heart rate come way down, and I was really excited and encouraged to run fast because I had just got rid of a problem that was holding me back. Like I knew I was going to run better now, for a little bit at least. And you can see right here on the screen that immediately when I came back, my mile after stopping to go to the loo was a 7:05. The next one is a 7:10, and after that, you know, it's just a gradual decline. Now, there was another problem that I was having, and that was with chafing. Those were the same shorts and base layer setup that I wear on most of my races. Okay, I generally don't mess around with trying anything new on race day, except this race day when I had 2 breakfasts. Anyway, for some reason today I had some chafing, and I'm not going to go into details there, but it wasn't pleasant, as you can imagine. And you know, I'm trying to adjust my shorts, trying to find relief, and I really couldn't, but I never had to stop because of it. So let's just say that I'll take that as a win. It was never so bad that I had to stop, and I was able to keep running. Now, I'm going to go back to the chart right here. This one isn't that good. Let's come down to this, the actual laps where we can see the numbers here. 14, that was a good mile. Number 15, that's where I stopped and go to the loo. And so 16 and 17, I think those are pretty good miles still. In fact, if I look over at my heart rate at 154, that's generally where I like it to be when I'm running at marathon race pace. So you can see if we just take a brief look at my heart rate up until that point, like from an aerobic standpoint, I was running pretty well. Like I had some top end room for my heart rate to increase without, you know, any more issues. So clearly it wasn't an aerobic issue that I was running into at this point. But just back to these splits, we can see here 7:10 at mile 17, and then I think this is where it really dropped off. That 12-second difference between 17 and 18, that is something to pay attention to. And then of course it goes downhill from there. Now this one right here at 7:28, you might think, oh Matt, you're picking up the pace. It looks really good. But no, not really. That 7:28 was this mile right here, so there is a lot of downhill on the down end of that really steep, just up and over. So, you know, that doesn't really count. And then after that downhill, my pace just slowed down ridiculously. Now, also, I'm not going to blame my equipment because I actually think that the Wave Rebellion Pro 3 is a phenomenal race shoe for certain people. And those certain people are runners that are stronger than me. Because I did notice, well, this is my right foot, so I did notice that on my left foot at about mile 19 or 20, I forget when it was exactly, but it was very late in the race. I did notice I was having a little bit of ankle pain. And I had heard that about the Wave Rebellion Pro 3 in the past, just because we have such a big stack height and such a unique geometry that is very aggressive, that sometimes if your ankles aren't strong enough, they can actually work your ankles a little more and you might start to feel some discomfort. And that's what I started feeling about mile 19. Now, I should say that I don't think that pain I was feeling was enough to actually slow me down. I mean, maybe it was, but at the time, it just felt a little unstable in the pain and not pain that was enough to slow me down. I don't know if that's even clear. But I was running in them, and with my left ankle, I did have the thought like I was worried to roll an ankle, but the shoes were still giving me like epic propulsion. Like when I started to dial in my thoughts into the shoe, I could tell that they were helping me out and they were moving me forward in a very propulsive way. Now, I do bring up that about the shoes as kind of like an excuse, because at this point my stomach isn't feeling well. Even though I went to the loo about a mile later, my stomach was still just kind of hurting. Like I wasn't sure, wasn't feeling good. Definitely didn't have to stop again, thank goodness for that, but I wasn't feeling right. I had the chafing and then I had a little bit of ankle pain. And I think I mentioned those three things on the video. Now that I actually dig into the numbers of my race, I don't know if those things were actually holding me back, because it looks like from mile 18 where I started that slowdown, like guys, that is right at the place where people generally run out of steam, where things start getting really difficult. And by the numbers, that is where things got difficult. Like that mile 15 where I had to stop for the loo, that's a total outlier, right? I had to stop, I had to take care of business. That happens when we're racing. So even though I did have those stomach issues and I had a little bit of chafing and I had a little bit of ankle pain in my left foot, I gotta say, if I'm totally honest with myself, I think I was just running out of steam. And not aerobic steam, but muscular steam. Like my legs were just tired from running a marathon. So now it's time to assign blame, because there's a couple things that I did wrong in this marathon that I hope to not make the same mistake on future marathons. And the first thing is the double breakfast, right? Don't do that. In fact, as soon as I published my race vlog, my wife called me and was like, "What are you thinking? Why did you eat so much before the race?" And then of course, several of you have commented kind of laughing, like, why did you eat so much before the race? So yes, I'm well aware that I shouldn't have eaten that much, but at the time, it seemed like the right thing to do. I was feeling good. I was worried about getting enough energy in for the race, and eating's fun. So that was my first mistake, and that is what I am going to blame on that mile 15 bathroom stop. So perhaps if I hadn't have done that, if I hadn't have eaten 2 breakfasts, if I had stuck to my usual breakfast schedule before a race, I potentially could have come in under 3 hours and 15 minutes. And that would have been a BQ for me. Now, I do have to tell you, when I crossed the halfway point at 1 hour and 33 minutes and some seconds, I had already started feeling my stomach, so I wasn't feeling 100%, but aerobically and muscularly, I was feeling really strong. Like when I saw that 133, I'll tell you, I actually thought to myself, I'm coming in under 310 today. So if that isn't a lesson in not counting your chickens before they hatched, I don't know what is. But I did have that thought. I was feeling that good that when I ran that 133, I was like, I think I can hold this pace. I mean, even if I slow down a little bit, I'm still going to come in well under 310. But alas, it was not to be. But luckily for me, the main thing is that I had a good time. And even when I was running it and my stomach was hurting and that chafing was going on, I was still able to enjoy the run, enjoy my surroundings, look around and realize that I'm running in Japan. Like I had a really epic day. And then of course, as is normal 100% of the time, as soon as I crossed the finish line and I stopped running, I felt really good. I mean, not really good, not like go and run another marathon good, but pretty good. And then once I finished the race, because we were there with Mizuno, we had Drew and Layla at the finish line waiting for us, and they had my jacket and I was able to put it on and stay warm immediately. But if you remember in the beginning of the video when I was talking about our VIP area and how I really can't speak for the rest of the marathon, I did hear that runners were outside for hours after they finished the race in order to go to the loo and pick up their bag. So once again, thank you Mizuno. Thank you of course for bringing me there and getting me into the Osaka Marathon, but also thank you for your support after. Like Drew and Layla were lifesavers. So now it's your turn. Look, I'm up for a good roasting. I know I did a lot of things wrong, so you have a couple of options. You can call me out on the stuff that I've already called myself out on, or if you saw somewhere else that I messed up, I would love to hear about it. I think ultimately it's going to come down to breakfast, pacing, and not using squirrel's nut butter or body glide. That would have been a very simple fix to the chafing. Anyway, it just goes to show that even when you have run a lot of marathons like me, you can still mess it up. And even when you mess it up, you can still have a good time. That's like a life lesson right there. Anyway, I guess the lesson that I've learned, aside from the obvious lessons, is that whatever happens, I am here for all of it. The good, the bad, and the ugly. And with that, it's Matt B. This has been my race recap of the 2025 Osaka Marathon. Be kind, be happy, run well. See you in a couple of days.